It's pretty amazing when you think about it. How does a newborn who is completely dependent on us turn into a curious, walking, talking toddler in just 2 years? It's one of the biggest transformations in our lives. So today, we're going to treat this like a study session and unpack one of the most famous theories that tries to explain it all: Jean Piaget's theory of cognitive development. And really, this is the big question that Piaget was obsessed with. How do we go from knowing basically nothing to building this incredibly rich and complex understanding of reality? It's a question that's been at the heart of developmental psychology for a long, long time. So let's open up our study guide and dive right in.
All right, here's our plan. First, we'll look at Piaget's basic assumptions, kinda like the baby's default operating system. Then, we'll get into his core concepts, the real nuts and bolts. After that, we'll journey through those incredible first 2 years, see how modern science has kind of reevaluated his work, and finally, check out some other theories on the block. Okay, so before we get into all the details, we gotta understand the ground rules of Piaget's world. What did he believe was true for every single child, right from day one? Piaget basically had four main ideas. First, biology gives us the raw tools for learning. Second, and this is the one you've probably heard, he saw kids as little experimenters, actively building their own understanding of the world by poking, prodding, and playing with it. Third, he said this all happens in four big, distinct stages. And last, he believed that every single kid goes through these stages in the exact same order. No skipping ahead.
All right, section 2. Now, if you really want to understand Piaget, you have to speak his language. Think of these next few ideas as the essential vocabulary for your study guide. It's the mental toolkit every baby uses to build their world. First step, we have this idea of a scheme. A scheme is just a mental framework, a way of organizing information. The best way to think about it is like a mental app. So a newborn comes with a pre-installed sucking app and a grasping app. They're the basic programs for interacting with everything. So what happens when a baby bumps into something new? Well, first, they try assimilation. They try to use the apps they already have to figure it out. For example, a baby will use their sucking app on a bottle, a pacifier, even their own fingers. They're trying to fit this new thing into what they already know. But what happens when the old app just doesn't work? I mean, you can't suck on a square block the same way you do a bottle. That's where accommodation comes in. The baby has to change their scheme or even create a brand new one. It's like updating your software or downloading a new app to open a new kind of file. This is where the real learning happens. So it's this constant back and forth between these two things that's so important. Assimilation is when things make sense, you're in a comfortable state, he called equilibrium. But when you find something that doesn't fit, you enter disequilibrium. And that little bit of mental confusion is what pushes you to accommodate, to change your thinking, and find a new balance. And that, right there, is cognitive growth. Now, let's see how all this stuff actually plays out during what is, let's be honest, the most dramatic period of our development. We're talking about that wild cognitive ride from birth to age 2. Piaget laid out these four major stages of development, but for this study session, we're going to zoom in on the big one, the foundational one, the sensory motor stage. It covers everything from birth all the way up to 2 years old. And the name pretty much says it all, right? Sensory for senses and motor for movement. During this time, babies don't really think with words or abstract ideas. They think by doing, by seeing, hearing, touching, tasting, and moving. All of their knowledge is built through direct, hands-on interaction with the world around them. So the journey starts with just basic reflexes, like sucking on anything that touches their lips. Then they start repeating actions that feel good with their own bodies, like, kicking their legs or waving their hands around for fun. That's the primary stage. By stage 3, they figure out they can make things happen in the outside world, like shaking a rattle to make noise, and they'll do it over and over and over again. But substage 4, this is where things get really interesting. Huge leaps happen here. Babies start to put actions together to solve problems, like pushing one toy out of the way to grab another, and the big one emerges: object permanence. They finally start to get that just because they can't see something, it doesn't mean it's gone forever. But it's still a bit shaky, which leads to this classic mistake called the A not B error. They'll look for a toy where they first found it and spot A, even if they just watched you hide it in spot B. In the next stage, the baby becomes a true little scientist. They're not just repeating old actions, they're actively experimenting. They'll drop a spoon, then a block, then their food, just to see what happens. But the grand finale of this whole sensory motor stage is mental representation. This is a huge milestone. It's the ability to finally hold images and ideas in their mind. This is what opens the door to things like make-believe play and imitating something they saw you do yesterday. Look, Piaget's theory was absolutely revolutionary. It gave us this amazing framework for understanding how thinking develops. But science never stands still, right? So researchers started asking, is this story 100% accurate? So did Piaget get everything right? I mean, his whole theory was based on carefully watching his own kids. But with new, more clever research methods, scientists started finding evidence that a lot of these cognitive skills might actually pop up much, much earlier than he ever thought possible. And one of the key tools they used is called the violation of expectation method. It is seriously clever. Here's how it works. First, you show a baby something happening over and over until they literally get bored and look away. Then, you show them two new versions, one that's totally normal and expected, and another that seems magical or impossible. The whole idea is, if they stare longer at the magical one, it's because it broke a rule they already understood. This experiment is a perfect example. Babies watch a tall carrot slide behind a screen that has a window in it. In the expected event, they see the top of the carrot pass by the window. But in the unexpected event, it doesn't. And what they found is that babies as young as 3.5 months old will stare way longer at that impossible event. This suggests they have a basic grasp of object permanence way, way earlier than Piaget thought. So if babies are smarter earlier than Piaget believed, how do we explain that? Well, this has led to some really interesting new theories that build on and sometimes challenge Piaget's original ideas. One of the big ones is called the core knowledge perspective. This theory says that, hey, maybe babies aren't born as blank slates. Maybe they come into the world with a kind of preloaded software, a set of innate core knowledge systems for understanding things like basic physics, numbers, and even what other people are thinking. Another popular idea is the information processing perspective. This one uses a computer metaphor. It suggests that cognitive development isn't about jumping through distinct stages, but more about gradual upgrades. As the brain's hardware matures, our mental software, things like our attention span, memory, and problem-solving skills, just get faster and more efficient over time. And take a look at this graph. It shows how long a baby can remember how to do a specific task at different ages. The jump is incredible. At 2 months, maybe they remember for a day, but by 18 months, they can remember for almost 3 months. This is pretty strong evidence for that information processing idea that our cognitive abilities are tied to these continuous improvements in our basic mental hardware. So, what's the big takeaway for your study guide? Well, think of it like this. Piaget gave us the original map. He showed us that children are active builders of their own minds, which was huge. But modern science, with all its new tools, is filling in the details, showing us that babies might start the journey with a much more sophisticated toolkit than anyone ever thought. And it leaves us with one of the biggest debates in all of psychology, one to really chew on. Do we build our knowledge from scratch, like Piaget's little scientist, or are we born with a kind of core knowledge that experience just helps to bring out?